Her daughter took her hearing aid, just for the night, said the speakers were acting up. Margot Ellis, retired interpreter and widowed mother of one, handed it over without protest. Across the table, Rachel raised a glass and toasted to future plans Margot wasn't part of. By morning, the trust Margot had quietly secured was fully activated. She had once given her daughter everything, including the benefit of doubt. Now Rachel would get nothing but a court notice and a locked deed. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The music was too loud for a dinner party. Not unbearable, but intentional, pulsing just above comfortable conversation, especially for someone with a cochlear sensitivity. Margot Ellis stood quietly in the kitchen of her daughter's pristine Asheville home, holding a bowl of sliced peaches Naomi had asked her to bring. The backsplash behind the stove shimmered under pendant lighting, too new to be familiar. The space felt curated, not lived in. Rachel approached with her usual exaggerated smile, all concern and calculation behind freshly glossed lips. "Mom, before everyone sits down," she said, touching Margot lightly in the arm, "would you mind removing your hearing aid? It's been picking up some distortion with the sound system. It happens with those older models." Margot blinked. "It's fine. I adjusted the gain this morning." Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's just for dinner. We want you to be comfortable, and the acoustics are tricky with all the chatter." She didn't wait for an answer. Her hand extended, palm up. Margot hesitated, then slipped the device off. She didn't argue. She'd learned over time that silence gave her more room than protest ever did. Rachel thanked her like she'd surrendered a privilege, not a lifeline. The birthday dinner for Naomi was set in the dining room, long farmhouse-style table, dressed with cloth napkins, tiny sprigs of rosemary, name cards embossed in gold. 12 guests. Margot was seated at the farthest end, across from the kitchen entrance, where the noise of dishes clattered and drowned out even the ambient hum. Everyone else sat tightly together mid-table, their chairs clustered like a council. Doug handed out wine. Rachel worked the room like a hostess with something to prove. Naomi looked uncomfortable in a floral dress. Margot knew she hated. Laughter traveled down the table but didn't land at her end. Just sound with no shape. Margot watched Rachel and Doug lean into each other, whispering frequently. Rachel's hand tapped on a folded folder near her salad plate, something she kept nudging out of view. Doug kept checking his watch. Midway through the meal, Naomi looked across the length of the table and mouthed, "Sorry." Margot gave her a small nod, almost imperceptible. Then came the toast. Rachel stood, glass raised, eyes glowing with performance. "To family," she began. "To support systems. To people who lift us up during transitions." Margot's stomach tightened. Rachel went on. "To Doug, for being the anchor of this family. To Naomi, who's growing into such a smart and poised young woman. To our mentors, our work, and the communities we build." No mention of Margot. Not a whisper of thanks. Not for the years she raised Rachel alone after her father passed. Not for the college tuition she co-signed on. Not for the porch where Naomi first learned to sign. Doug clapped awkwardly. Others followed. Naomi stared into her water glass. After dessert, Rachel handed Margot a reusable bag with her hearing aid inside. "Thank you again, Mom," she said, softly, with too much sweetness. "You were such a calming presence tonight." Margot nodded once. Didn't say a word. Back home, the house was dim, quiet in the way only solitude can be, not empty but deliberate. Margot locked the door, turned off the entry light, and walked down the hall into her study. She reached into her bottom drawer and pulled out her backup hearing aid from its charging case. She clicked it on, adjusted the settings, and slid it behind her ear. The familiar buzz settled into clarity. Then she opened her purse. Tucked inside, zipped beneath a folded napkin, was a slim digital recorder, small, discreet, voice-activated. She hadn't brought it for paranoia. She brought it because instinct had long since learned what her ears sometimes missed. She clicked play. The voices crackled to life. Rachel's, she won't catch any of this. Her short-term retention's getting worse. Doug, the sooner we transition her out, the better. Especially before the new appraisal kicks in. Rachel, will call it wellness-based guardianship. Easier to file with a memory pattern. Margot sat back in her chair, eyes locked on the dark window in front of her. Her own reflection stared back, calm, lined but awake now in ways they hadn't counted on. She pressed rewind and listened again. Margot sat at her kitchen table, the digital recorder centered like a loaded weapon between her hands. Outside, the early morning fog curled over the Blue Ridge foothills, but her mind stayed locked inside that dining room, that table where her hearing aid had been taken like a child's toy. She pressed play. Fuzz, clink, background laughter. Then Rachel's voice, crisp under the din. She won't remember anything we say anyway. Just smile, and she'll nod. Doug's voice followed, low and uneven. We have to get her out before the new appraisal hits. The market's hot right now. Another voice in the background, Rachel again joking to someone. She thinks she's still running the house like it's the 90s. We're just trying to give her structure. Margot exhaled, steady and slow. She'd expected manipulation, but the certainty in their tone was chilling. They weren't discussing options. They were drafting the ending of her independence like it was a spreadsheet line item. Her phone buzzed beside the mug of cold tea she hadn't touched. Naomi, 6:12 a.m. Want my version? I left mine recording under the buffet table. It caught them whispering in the hallway too. Margot smiled. Small wry. The kid had inherited more than just her quiet. She typed back, send it over when you're ready, and delete the original after you back it up. Naomi's reply came seconds later, already done. By mid-morning, Margot was standing in the sun-drenched foyer of a small brick bungalow nestled 2 blocks from downtown. The place smelled like lemon oil and dry paper, and the welcome mat outside still bore the faded imprint of the ADA symbol. Della Marsh didn't need much decor. Just a steel filing cabinet, a pot of mint tea, and memory like a locked vault. I didn't expect you this soon, Della said, ushering her in. She wore reading glasses at the tip of her nose and a half-buttoned flannel over a linen tee. But something in your voice said urgent and ugly. Margot handed her the recorder and a flash drive. Rachel and Doug, she said. They think I'm not fully present, that I'm maneuverable. Della's eyes narrowed. Manipulation wrapped in soft language is still abuse. She plugged in the flash drive, pulled up the audio and let it run. The room went quiet except for the familiar tinny tones of betrayal. At the sentence about guardianship, Della froze the audio and hit pause. Did I hear that right? She asked. They're actively preparing to file for guardianship without consent? Margot nodded. Della didn't answer at first. She turned and walked to her file cabinet, slid open a drawer labeled Illis Inactive, and rifled through until her hand landed on a thick envelope. I filed this with you in 2015, she said, pulling out a stamped folder. We set it up after that stroke scare. You passed every capacity test, and we drafted protections based on disability autonomy laws. You never activated it because you didn't want to spook Rachel. She laid the folder down on the table. Across the top, power of attorney, pending activation estate protection package. Margot looked at it, then at Della. How enforceable is it? In a state like North Carolina, Della said. With a history of ADA oversight and a judge like Deborah Quinn, if we get ahead of this, it's not just enforceable, it's airtight. A beat passed. Then Della sat back and cracked her knuckles. Rachel's trying to sneak in the back door with a soft guardianship. That's the trick now. Use concern language to seize power while pretending it's love. She didn't take my hearing, Margot said. She tried to take my witness. And failed, Della said, grinning. Outside, the mountains sat quiet and strong. Margot mirrored them. Della tapped the folder. You ready to turn this on? Margot didn't hesitate. Yes. Quietly. Della reached for her notary stamp, her voice low and resolute. Then let's turn the volume back up. 1 page at a time. It was a Thursday when Rachel and Doug dropped by unannounced. Margot had just finished watering the violets in the kitchen windowsill and was letting the kettle hum low on the stove when the doorbell rang. Two sharp chimes, impatient and rehearsed. Rachel stepped in with a clipboard. Doug followed with a digital thermometer and a flashlight. "We were just in the neighborhood," Rachel said. Airily, "Thought we'd help check the HVAC since the weather's turning. You know how unpredictable these old units can get." Margot raised an eyebrow. "It's serviced every 6 months. Never missed." Doug gave a shrug and a grin that didn't quite meet his eyes. "Just being thorough." They moved through her house like agents, not family, peering into corners, opening closet doors, flipping light switches. Doug descended into the basement without asking. Rachel lingered in the living room, making quiet notes every few feet. "Nice windows," she murmured, tapping her pen against the trim. "Good light. This space could be so open with just a few changes." Margot stayed silent, one hand resting on the back of her favorite armchair, Camille's chair. Her late wife had sat there every Sunday, reading with Naomi in her lap, sunlight pooling across the floor like warm syrup. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled faintly, and pocketed it without answering. They left 30 minutes later, citing errands and vague work deadlines. Margot walked them to the door, watched them back out of the driveway in Doug's hybrid SUV, and stood on the porch until the vehicle turned the corner. Only then did she step back inside and notice it. A small, glossy rectangle tucked halfway under the toaster. She slid it out with one careful finger. "Stacy Brecklin, Asheville Property Solutions, licensed broker, vertical bar, specializing in rapid estate transitions, modernizing homes with heart." Margot held it between two fingers like it might drip something sticky. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Naomi, 5:07 p.m. I overheard them in the car. They said this would flip fast with the right buyers." "You okay?" Margot typed slowly. "I'm fine. Thank you for telling me." Then, after a pause, she added, "Don't delete anything you heard." "Not yet." The next morning, Margot sat in Della's office, sunlight bouncing off the legal folders like glass. Della scanned a report on her laptop, one brow slowly rising. She filed it. Della said. Margot nodded. Rachel submitted a request to initiate early transfer of power of attorney, citing reduced executive functions and a pattern of non-responsiveness. She spun the laptop so Margot could see. Filed under the healthcare provisions, without a single medical record. No doctor. No diagnosis. Margot's voice stayed calm, cold. "She's manufacturing incompetence. She'll be sorely disappointed," Della said. "Especially since we activated your trust structure last week." Della clicked a few keys, encrypting the new document. "I've already sent a heads up to Quinn. Nothing official yet, just the shape of things." Margot stood, sliding her coat over her shoulders. "Don't confront her yet," Della warned. "Let her walk herself further into the trap." "I won't say a word," Margot said. "I'll just live my life like I don't know she's circling." That night, Margot lit a fire in the small brick hearth and sat with a crossword. She let the silence settle around her, thick, warm, watchful. At 9:42 p.m., her phone lit up on the armrest. "Naomi, 9:42 p.m. They think you can't fight. Want me to help?" Margot stared at the screen, her lips parting just slightly. Outside, the wind kicked leaves across the driveway, like footsteps that didn't quite make it to the door. The invitation came via email. Subject line: Family Wellness Discussion. Casual and supportive. Margot read it twice. She caught the performance in Rachel's tone, like an HR memo disguised as concern. "Just a chat," the message said. "Just making sure everyone's prepared for the next chapter." When she arrived, the house smelled of cinnamon and air freshener. Too clean. Too prepared. Doug opened the door with the same neutral smile he wore to funerals. "Hey Margot, glad you made it." She handed him a pie plate wrapped in foil. Not because they deserved it, but because habit dies hard. Rachel waited in the living room, with a faux leather binder open on the coffee table. "Mom," she said brightly, "let's sit. I wanted to walk you through some thoughts we've had." The words hit Margot like frost on a windshield. Thoughts we've had. Not requests. Not possibilities. Plans already named and printed. Rachel smoothed her blouse, then flipped open the binder. We've spoken with some senior wellness consultants. They have a beautiful facility up near the parkway. Memory care, occupational therapy, social programs. It's proactive, Mom. You wouldn't be alone. Doug chimed in, soft as ever. They do tiered independence. It's not like a home. It's modern. Margot blinked once, then leaned slightly forward. Have I given you reason to think I can't live in my own home? Rachel's voice softened. Too soft. It's not about that. It's about preparing before something happens. It's mercy, Mom. Not reaction. Mercy. Margot studied the binder. Clean fonts, soft images of elderly people playing board games in color-coordinated lounges. Manufactured joy. Sanitized living. She reached out, ran a finger down the edge of the page, then folded her hands neatly. This is very thoughtful, she said. I'd like to sleep on it before I give you an answer. Rachel smiled in triumph, a little too quickly. Of course, that's reasonable. Doug exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway. She wore her earbuds like armor, but one was dangling loose. Her eyes were red. She didn't say anything. She just watched. Margot caught her gaze. No words passed between them, but a thread tightened between. In the silence, Rachel rose and patted Margot's shoulder as if concluding a successful sales pitch. We'll revisit in a few days, okay? And we'll help with packing, of course. Margot stood, nodded politely, and left without touching the binder again. At home, she moved through her house like a curator, not a resident, brushing her hand along the mantel, lifting a photo of Camille, touching the frayed quilt still folded on the arm of the couch. She placed her purse on the table, opened her laptop, and began typing with the steady calm of someone who had done this before, in board meetings, in advocacy letters, in courtrooms where silence carried more authority than noise. Subject: execution of authority. Time sensitive, to Judge Deborah Quinn. Dear Deborah, it's time. Rachel has presented a plan under the pretense of wellness. It is in fact an attempt at forced transition. I've remained quiet to document their intent. Attached are audio logs, images, and my updated witness list. Della has everything notarized, ready to execute authority. Quietly. Regards, Margot Ellis. She hit send, then poured herself a glass of water. She didn't tremble, didn't cry. On the counter sat Rachel's printed brochure, still folded. Margot slid it into the trash without unfolding it. She didn't need to look at a place someone else picked for her. She already had a home, and she wasn't leaving it behind. The morning air was brittle with late winter frost, sunlight slicing sharp through the blinds as Margot stood in Della's kitchen with her coat still on, and her hands folded in front of her like a witness ready to be sworn in. Sign here, Della said, tapping the thick sheaf of documents with a lacquered nail. Her kitchen table had been cleared of everything except the papers, a black gel pen, and 2 steaming mugs of black tea. Then again here. In here. Margot's signature was smooth, unshaking. She had practiced it for years on advocacy letters, protest petitions, interpreter forms. Each letter now felt like a quiet strike. The documents included a formal revocation of any prior power of attorney nominations, a declaration of competency, with attached medical statement, a protective trust enclosure, shielding her home and assets under ADA housing provisions, a new primary trustee, Margot Ellis, no alternates. Della notarized each page with an audible clunk of her stamp. There, she said. No one touches you now, not without a federal fight. An hour later, Judge Deborah Quinn leaned over her courtroom desk and read the affidavit aloud, slowly, lips moving in rhythm like someone reciting scripture. The woman didn't smile, but Margot caught the slight gleam in her eye. She filed guardianship paperwork last Thursday, Quinn said, flipping a page. And you just steamrolled it without saying a word. You always did know when to strike. Margot's voice was soft. Silence isn't weakness, Deborah. It's storage. Quinn signed the order in fluid strokes. It's official. Your legal agency is affirmed, your trust protected, and their window just slammed shut. Rachel was in the middle of a conference call when her phone buzzed. Buncombe County Clerk. Case notice update. She tapped it open and froze. The words rearranged themselves on the screen like a spell broken mid-cast. Notice guardianship petition for Margot Ellis denied. Protective trust filed. All current powers of attorney nullified. Do not refile without court approval. Across the room, Doug asked something she didn't hear. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then finally, she filed something behind our backs. Doug blinked. Wait, she what? Rachel stared at the screen. She lawyered up. I don't know when, I don't know how, but she did it before the county could process our petition. Her voice dropped, and she locked the house into a trust. Doug rubbed the back of his neck. Is that permanent? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Back at her cottage, Margot was watering her violets when her phone vibrated. One message. No words, just an emoji from Naomi. Margot smiled faintly, the lines around her eyes creasing like folded linen. She texted back one word. Watch. She knew Rachel's next move would be reaction, not reason, and she was ready. At 7:13 the next morning, Margot was sipping coffee in her robe, the sunrise spilling pink and gold across her porch, when she heard the knock. No, not a knock. A bang. Rachel's voice pierced the front door. We need to talk, now. Margot didn't flinch. She reached over, turned down her hearing aid, and stood slowly. A pause. A breath. Then she opened the door, face unreadable. Let the war begin. On her terms. The knock was less forceful this time. Sharp, then tentative. Like guilt had softened Rachel's knuckles. Margot opened the front door without a word, and stepped aside, letting them in without ceremony. No greeting. No questions. Rachel and Doug stood just inside the threshold, stiff and underdressed for the cold. Rachel had forgotten her coat again. A habit born from believing things would always be waiting, warmed and ready. I think we need to talk, Rachel began. You're escalating things unnecessarily. Margot didn't reply. She moved slowly to the kitchen, her wool slippers whispering over the old pine floorboards, and retrieved a kettle from the stove. The click of the gas flame was the only sound for several seconds. Doug followed her in, his eyes flickering toward the fireplace mantel, where 3 framed photos stood. Margot with Naomi as a child, Margot in her interpreter's uniform, and a black and white photo of Margot and Camille in front of the original house. All 3 women, all still standing. Rachel stayed behind, arms crossed. Mom, what's happening here? I saw the filings. Guardianship revoked, trust locked, POA gone. What is this? Margot opened the cabinet, selected her blue and white porcelain teacup, the one her mother had brought down from Maine, and set it on the counter with care. This feels like an ambush. Rachel continued. You're twisting this into something hostile, and that was never the intention. We were trying to help you. Margot turned, expression unreadable. She held up a finger. One moment, and placed 2 fresh hearing aid batteries on the counter, right beside the teacup. Rachel blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Doug shifted uncomfortably. He knew. He was there. Margot finally spoke. You took more than my sound, she said, voice even. You tried to take my personhood, and you did it with soft voices and open smiles. I heard it anyway. Rachel took a step forward. No, that's not, Mom. You're misunderstanding. This was about your care, your safety. You planned a life I never asked for, Margot replied, and you framed it like compassion. Doug finally said something, almost a whisper. We didn't mean to hurt you. You just meant to move me out before the appraisal came through, she said, setting a packet of papers on the counter. Her movements were calm, precise. A woman shelving a book she'd already read twice. Rachel picked up the documents. Her eyes scanned the bold headings: declaration of legal competency, revocation of prior power of attorney, a trust protection enacted. You went to Deborah. Rachel's tone sharpened. Behind our backs. You went to a notary with a real estate listing while I was baking Naomi's birthday cake, Margot answered. So let's not cry foul over timing. Rachel's jaw clenched. You blindsided me. Margot raised her cup and blew gently across the surface. No, she said. You just didn't think I could still see straight. Or aim. Doug stepped back, folding his arms. Maybe we were wrong, but it didn't have to go legal. It already was, Margot said. Her voice suddenly flat. You just assumed you'd win before I realized it was a fight. A pause thickened between them. The steam from her tea rose in slow spirals, the scent of bergamot curling through the air. Then came another knock at the door. Lighter, familiar. Naomi stepped inside, holding her phone. Grandma, she said, her voice bright with a current of urgency. Judge Quinn wants to see you. She says it's time to finalize the trust. Margot nodded once. Calm, certain. Rachel's mouth parted. Wait, finalize what? But Margot was already placing her cup in the sink and slipping her coat off the hook by the door. Lock up when you leave, she said, over her shoulder. And don't forget your intentions. You left them all over my house. Margot stepped into Judge Deborah Quinn's chambers, like she was stepping onto holy ground, not because the walls were adorned with faded legal diplomas, or because the air smelled like paper and power, but because it was quiet. It was hers. No interruptions, no gaslighting under the guise of concern. Deborah didn't bother with small talk. She waved Margot in, pushed a mug of decaf toward her on the oak table, and slid a thin folder across the polished surface. You've been busy, she said. Margot sat slowly, her cardigan buttoned to the collar, despite the mild weather. Rachel likes to whisper when she thinks I can't hear. I've had time to listen. The judge opened the folder. Her request for ex parte review of your capacity. Rejected. Twice. Her mouth curved slightly. She made 3 separate calls to my assistant, claiming you were in cognitive decline. Then tried a back channel through your primary care office. I left them a voicemail 3 days before she did, Margot said, lifting her mug. They knew better. Deborah tapped the table. You knew this would come to court. I knew they'd never stop at suggestion, Margot said. Only signatures make them nervous. From her canvas tote, she pulled out 2 blue folders marked in embossed gold, one labeled financial record, the other medical declarations, notarized logs from 2 years of routine care, clean cognitive screens, independent tax filing, energy bills. Margot didn't just keep records. She treated them like survival gear. Deborah skimmed the sheets and exhaled. This is armor. You built a legal wall, stone by stone. I had to, Margot said. Because they'd already started measuring the house like it was vacant. The judge's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled faintly, and held it up. Incoming Della Marsh. You'll want this, she said. Answering. Della's voice came through speaker. Brisk and efficient. Just sent you a PDF. Ethics complaint from 2016. Rachel Ellis altered internal assessments to expedite 2 disability terminations at her job. 1 filed retaliation. Quiet settlement. Deborah raised an eyebrow. And you have a copy? I am the copy, Della said. I documented the whole thing for ADA archives. I knew she'd try this. Useful leverage, the judge murmured. Even if it stays sealed. Della's voice warm. Margot's no fool, but make sure she's protected from all ends. They'll come at her sideways next. The call ended. Margot sipped her tea. You know what bothers Rachel the most? Deborah leaned forward. Interested. What? That I'm still here, Margot said. Quiet and clean as a blade. That I didn't fold when she stopped pretending to help. The judge pulled a second folder from her drawer. This one heavier. Inside, final estate restructuring documents, signed and witnessed. Legal protections locked under federal disability law. Beneficiary reassignments. Trust seals. No contest clauses. You sure? Deborah asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Margot replied. This isn't about resentment, it's about protection and peace. She signed every page with a steady hand. Across town at precisely 2:08 p.m., a certified envelope was signed for by the receptionist at Rachel Ellis's office. She was in a meeting. It sat unopened on her desk for 37 minutes. Then she walked in, saw the seal, and recognized the return address. Margot's signature, in black ink. Della's as witness. Rachel sliced it open with her company letter opener, her hand stilled as her eyes landed on the first page. Notice of Inheritance Relocation. Form 1084. Effective immediately. All prior expectations of entitlement are hereby null. Succession privileges reassigned. And then the bottom line. Signed, Margot E. Ellis, independent trustee and legal grant, or her mouth dried. Her jaw clenched. There it was, in black and white, her grip slipping on the house, the plan, the story she'd told herself about control. The invite came by text. Simple, short, pretending to be harmless. Family dinner, just us, hoping to talk things through. Please come. Rachel Margot read it once. Then again, she didn't bother to reply. Instead, she set the phone down on her kitchen counter and went back to trimming the stems on a vase of white tulips Naomi had brought over the day before. She didn't need a seat at a table built on gaslight and guilt. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Doug called. His voice was thin, fragile, like tissue trying to hold weight. "We're trying to fix this, Margot," he said. "It's just a chance to reset. Clear the air. No paperwork." Margot let a long silence fill the line. Then she answered with 2 words. "No thank you." That evening the Ellis home looked pristine from the outside. Light glowing through the windows, wine glasses arranged neatly on a reclaimed wood table. Rachel moved with clipped precision, checking the oven, smoothing her blouse, rehearsing the speech in her head. She had practiced it 3 times already. It opened with empathy, pivoted into concern, and ended with, "We're just trying to support you through change." What she didn't expect was Naomi. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:05 p.m. Rachel opened it, expecting her mother. "Naomi." She blinked. "Where's Naomi?" Walked past her into the dining room, backpack slung over one shoulder. "She's not coming," Naomi said, pulling out a seat. "But she sent these." She unzipped the pack, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table. Doug looked confused. Rachel's face tightened. Naomi didn't wait. She unfolded a stack of documents and began laying them out like tarot cards. Updated trust structures, beneficiary reassignment forms, notarized affidavits, letter of disinheritance for Rachel and Doug, citing undue influence. Rachel's hands twitched toward the pile, but Naomi placed one finger on top. "I've already submitted copies to the clerk and Judge Quinn's office," she said calmly. "This is just courtesy." Doug cleared his throat. "Naomi, this isn't your place." Naomi didn't flinch. "It is if I'm the successor to the trust, which I am. Legally." Rachel's mouth opened then closed again. She reached for a wine glass, suddenly too light in the wrist. "This isn't enforceable," she said finally, voice trembling under a veneer of control. "She's not. She doesn't understand what she's doing. She's being manipulated." Naomi leaned forward. "You mean the woman who raised you, taught me to sign before I could talk, and who still balances her checkbook by hand? That woman." Her voice softened but didn't lose its edge. "She knew exactly what she was doing. You just didn't hear her." Rachel stood abruptly. The room felt tighter now. The air turned thick with tension. Doug stayed seated, hands folded, eyes down. Naomi gathered the papers back into the envelope, zipped her backpack and paused at the door. "She didn't need to come here to fight," she said. "She already won where it mattered." And with that she left. Margot was at home, reading on her porch in the glow of a citronella candle, when her phone buzzed, a voicemail. "Rachel." She waited a moment, then another. Then she pressed play. Rachel's voice was low, sharp, with barely masked fury. "You want a war, mother? You'll get one. Let's see how long you stay smug when everything comes crashing down." Margot didn't move. She didn't reply. But she did smile. Just slightly. She opened her notebook, flipped to a clean page and wrote, "Retaliation tends to arrive after leverage is lost." The air in the advisor's office smelled faintly of toner and citrus-scented cleaner, cold, professional, almost sterile. Margot sat across from the mahogany desk, hands folded neatly over a leather-bound folder she'd carried for decades. Her hearing aid buzzed gently in her right ear, catching the low hum of fluorescent lights overhead. "Let's begin," she said, her voice firm but even. "I'd like to restructure everything." Her advisor Carla Jimenez blinked in surprise. "Everything?" Margot met her eyes. "Yes, all retirement accounts, investment portfolios, real property disbursements. The trust titles need new beneficiaries." Carla paused. "You're aware that Rachel filed herself and Sophie Ellis as contingent trustees 3 years ago?" "I'm aware." Margot opened her folder and slid a notarized affidavit across the desk. "They're both being removed, effective immediately." Carla adjusted her glasses, scanning the documents. "And who would you like listed as the new successor?" Margot smiled. "Naomi Ellis. Full name, no secondary." The keyboard clacked softly as Carla updated the digital records. The cursor blinked over Rachel's name for a beat too long before it vanished, replaced by Naomi's clean signature. Outside the glass windows, the sky was soft with early autumn haze. Margot watched a pair of red leaves swirl down toward the parking lot, as if nature itself were shedding what no longer served. As Carla printed out confirmation packets, Margot's phone vibrated in her purse. One new alert. From a monitoring service Naomi had quietly helped her set up. A flagged attempt on her digital healthcare file. She opened the app. Unauthorized activity detected. New healthcare proxy creation attempt. IP traced to Rachel Ellis Healthcare Office, Asheville, NC. Flagged and frozen. Margot stared at the screen, the corner of her mouth lifting in something between a smirk and a sigh. "Everything all right?" Carla asked, glancing up. "Better than it's been in years." That afternoon, Judge Quinn's number lit up Margot's phone. "Rachel's stunt hit my radar," the judge said without preamble. "She tried to file a healthcare proxy behind your back. We traced it." Margot didn't sound surprised. "That one's slippery. And lazy. Licensing board's been notified. Between this and the guardianship petition, she'll be in hot water by Friday." "She should be," Margot said simply. "If she did this to me, she'll do it to someone else." Across town in the HR wing of Ellis Healthcare Group, Rachel Ellis sat stiffly in a glass-walled conference room. Her supervisor and an external auditor from Legal Review sat across from her, a manila folder between them. "We've received reports of undue influence," the auditor said, "and a possible digital violation tied to healthcare proxy impersonation. We're opening a formal review." Rachel's voice cracked. "This is retaliation. You don't know my mother. She's slipping. She doesn't remember things." The auditor opened the folder and pulled out one sheet. Margot's competency certification. Signed, sealed, witnessed. "We disagree." That night, Margot sat in her kitchen, the overhead light casting soft gold over her polished countertops. She was pouring a cup of chamomile tea when the front door creaked open. "Grandma?" Naomi's voice was quiet, tentative. In the kitchen, Margot called. Naomi appeared in the doorway, one duffel bag over her shoulder and her sketch pad under her arm. Margot didn't ask. She just pulled down a second teacup from the cabinet and set it beside her own. Naomi exhaled. "I didn't want to ask permission. I didn't want to be in that house anymore." "You don't have to explain," Margot said gently. "This was always your home too." They sat in silence, the kind that spoke volumes. Outside, the mountains slept under a velvet sky. Inside, the war was quietly shifting ground. The table was modest. No crystal, no centerpieces, no curated playlist humming in the background. Just the smell of rosemary and lentil soup drifting from the stove, the warmth of late sun pooling through the front windows, and the quiet sound of laughter coming from the hallway, where Naomi and Della debated whether to add cornbread or biscuits. Margot stirred the pot gently, her hearing aid nestled snug behind her ear, catching every rustle and crackle. This wasn't about control. This was about clarity. Judge Quinn arrived just before 6, hair pinned neatly, eyes scanning the living room like a seasoned strategist stepping into a neutral zone. She carried a bottle of wine and a small box wrapped in newspaper comics. For you, she said, pressing it into Margot's hands. It's not legal tender, but it pairs well with revolution. Margot chuckled, setting it on the mantel beside the framed photo of her late husband. We're eating light tonight. Soup and hard truths. The kitchen hummed with steam and wood and garlic. Naomi ladled soup into mismatched ceramic bowls, balancing each one with a practiced hand. It's the same recipe she used to make for me when I had strep, she told Judge Quinn, her smile full of things unsaid. As they sat down, Margot reached beneath her seat and pulled out a slim envelope. No dramatic flourish. No speech. Naomi, she said, sliding it across the table. This is yours now. Naomi blinked. What is? Margot sipped her tea. The house. The land. The trust. Full beneficiary. Effective immediately. Naomi stared, fingers trembling slightly as she opened the letter. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, then looked up. Grandma? I told you, Margot said gently. Silence isn't the same as surrender. Judge Quinn nodded in approval, lifting her wine glass. To legacies kept, not stolen. Della raised hers too, and to girls who listen when no one else does. They clinked glasses softly, just as the motion sensor light flicked on outside. A pair of headlights glared through the bay window. Margot didn't move. She recognized the silhouette in the driver's seat before the knock even came. Naomi stood first. I've got it. Doug stood on the front step, shoulders hunched in a wrinkled fleece jacket, his hands shoved in his pockets. Hey, Naomi said warily. He glanced behind her. Is she okay? Naomi didn't answer. She's not stable, Doug whispered, his voice hoarse. She's unraveling, Naomi. You don't see it, but Naomi tilted her head. The only one unraveling is you. And maybe Rachel. Doug closed his eyes for a beat. You don't know everything that's going on. No, Naomi said. But I know enough. She stepped back and shut the door quietly behind her. Inside, Margot reached for the cornbread tin, placing a piece on Judge Quinn's plate with deliberate calm. They still think the storm is coming, she said softly. Quinn smiled. That's because they never realized it already hit. Della chuckled into her soup. And left you standing. Naomi returned, silent for a moment, then sat back down. Her eyes were glassy, but she kept her voice level. He's afraid, not of you though. Of what comes next. Margot folded her hands. He had 100 small moments to step in. He didn't. The evening ended without dessert, just quiet conversation and a shared sense that something had shifted permanently. Later that night, as Margot rinsed the last dish, a soft ping came from her phone. She dried her hands on a dish towel and tapped the screen. Subject: interview request. From Aldi Jacobs at BlueRidgePost.com. Body: Miss Ellis. I'm writing a series on elder manipulation in the Carolinas. I'd like to speak with you. On record. Margot read it twice. Then slowly she smiled. The smell of cedar hit Margot before she even lifted the lid. It was sharp, earthy, and familiar, like opening a forest sealed in time. Dust shimmered in the sunlight that sliced through the attic window, and the metal latch clicked open with a small protest, as if warning her what lay inside was not light, but memory. Inside the chest, layer upon layer of folders, envelopes, yellowed pages and photo sleeves lay perfectly aligned. Margot's archive, untouched and invisible to the people who thought they had buried her voice. Naomi crouched beside her, eyes wide. It's like a time capsule, but weaponized. Margot didn't smile. She just reached for the top folder and opened it. A 1982 black and white photo slid out, her in her interpreter uniform, standing beside a state senator at an ADA funding rally. Behind it, a sheaf of typed letters to county commissioners, policy memos, and transcripts from accessibility hearings. Naomi lifted one envelope labeled Private Correspondence. Rachel E. and blinked. Did you keep all of it? Everything that mattered, Margot said, voice calm. Everything they thought I'd forget. They spent the afternoon cataloging. The living room became a maze of organized piles, property records, health records, employment, witness statements, and a folder Naomi named erasures, a quiet collection of moments when Margot had been deliberately excluded, omitted or underestimated. At sunset, Della arrived with her scanner and legal pad. She gave the room one long look. "I knew you kept receipts. I didn't know you were the Library of Congress." "I had to," Margot said, handing her the oldest letter. "They weren't going to tell the truth, so I kept mine intact." Della's eyes narrowed as she scanned the letter, dated March 1998, and read aloud, "I know how to get what I want from her. I'll take everything one day. She won't even know it's happening." It was Rachel's handwriting, young, cocky, and chilling in its presence. Naomi sat back, stunned. She really meant it. Even then, Della looked up. "And you never said a word." Margot shook her head. "They thought I was docile. I let them think it." They scanned the letter and filed it in a digital folder labeled Precedence, password locked and backed up twice. By dusk, the table was stacked with flash drives and a printed packet nearly 2 inches thick. Margot tapped it once with her index finger. "This goes to my attorney. Unopened. No explanations needed." "You want a cover page?" Della asked. "Just the title," Margot said, then paused before writing on the first page herself. "Preservation, evidence of intent and omission." The next morning, Rachel sat at her desk, tapping through emails while pretending to work. Her eyes looked puffy, jaw tight, hair tied with a tension that mirrored her unraveling grip. The office receptionist knocked lightly and handed her a manila envelope. "Certified delivery," she said, then hesitated. "From the County Bar Association." Rachel's breath hitched. She peeled back the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Subject: notice of formal complaint and subpoena date. Hearing scheduled 2 weeks. Details: allegations of undue influence and breach of fiduciary ethics. She stared at the page as if it had rewritten her name in ink. She couldn't wash off. Her coffee sat untouched. Outside her window, the wind picked up, scattering yellow leaves across the pavement. She didn't notice. All she could see was a single bold line in the middle of the document: Complainant, Margot Ellis. The porch was still damp from last night's rain, but Margot didn't care. She settled into the old wooden rocker with her coffee, legs wrapped in the shawl Naomi had knitted 2 Christmases ago. Beside her, Naomi curled up with a sketch pad and pencil. Her strokes were light, deliberate, focused. Margot held her phone in both hands. The screen cast a faint blue glow against her lined face as she uploaded a photo Naomi had taken earlier, the two of them sitting together in that same rocker, the mountains behind them silver in the sunrise. She typed only 2 words in the caption: "Still here." She hesitated for a beat, then tapped post. It took less than an hour. The likes came slowly, a few at a time: old co-workers from her days interpreting in the courthouse, neighbors who hadn't known how bad things had gotten, a former student who commented, "You taught me how to speak. Looks like you're still doing it." Beneath the warmth, one angry red emoji blinked on the reaction bar. Just one. Margot didn't need to investigate. Rachel had at least 3 fake accounts. This one was North Blue 77, with a profile picture of a flower that didn't grow within 3 states of Asheville. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her phone buzzed. A message from Doug. "Doug Ellis. I don't know how to fix this." She stared at the text. No hello, no punctuation, just the limp echo of a man who'd chosen comfort over decency for too long. Margot typed carefully. "Margot Ellis. You already decided not to." No anger. No second message. She closed the thread and let it sit. That afternoon, a call came from Della. "Check the citizen record." Margot pulled up the article online. The headline was simple, almost polite: "Silent Struggles, Elder Manipulation and the Hidden Face of Guardianship Fraud." The article never named names, but it didn't have to. It told of a 72-year-old Asheville woman, long regarded as competent and independent, whose adult daughter had filed for early guardianship behind her back, citing increasing confusion and instability. It mentioned a forged health proxy attempt, now under review. It referenced a trust realignment, filed with full legal standing, and it quoted an anonymous source. When they thought she wasn't listening, she was documenting. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was evidence. Naomi stood at the doorway, reading from her phone. Grandma, you went viral. Sort of. I posted a picture, Margot said, sipping her tea. That's all. Naomi grinned. Sometimes that's enough. Later that night, Naomi's phone pinged with a message from a classmate she barely spoke to. Just a screenshot of the Facebook post and a four-word message. Your grandma's a badass. Naomi didn't reply. She just looked at Margot with something that flickered between pride and awe. The next morning, a tinny voice buzzed from Margot's kitchen radio as she spread strawberry jam over a slice of toast. Coming up next, the host said, we speak with local Judge Deborah Quinn, who's been involved in a recent case highlighting flaws in guardianship oversight and elder protection law. Some are calling it a landmark moment. Margot froze. The host's voice softened as Quinn came on the air. This isn't just one case, she said. It's a reflection of how easily rights can be challenged when age is involved. But this woman, this client, kept her records, her clarity, and her dignity. She's a case study in justice done right. The host laughed, incredulous. She sounds like someone I'd want on my legal team. She's someone I'd want at my kitchen table, Quinn said. Margot smiled to herself and poured another cup of coffee. The pen didn't shake, not even a little. Margot held it steady over the signature line, the light from the window slicing across the thick stack of trust documents like a blade of quiet justice. Naomi sat beside her, her fingers twitching in her lap, resisting the urge to bounce her knee. Della stood near the filing cabinet, arms crossed, watching with the intensity of a notary and the pride of a lifelong friend. The final signature sealed the deed. Naomi exhaled. That's it. That's it, Margot said, clicking the pen shut. Every inch of this land, the house, the trees, protected, untouchable, forever. The lawyer nodded, collecting the paperwork. The county will finalize it by the end of the day. But this is airtight, generational. Outside, the sun filtered through the porch screen, catching specks of dust mid-air like suspended memory. Naomi stood slowly, peering through the slats. Rachel's black SUV crept along the road, just outside the fence line. Not stopping, not speeding, just watching. In the passenger seat, Doug's silhouette was stiff, motionless. Naomi didn't wave. She just turned and walked into the garden. Margot joined her, their steps quiet over the flagstones. Naomi reached down and clipped a fading rose, trimming the stem with a practiced flick of her wrist. Margot handed her a new stake. They always sag after heavy rain, she said softly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the SUV drive on. 2 days later, a courier envelope arrived on Doug's porch, from a law firm downtown. Inside, divorce paperwork, hand-signed. Doug's voicemail cracked on Margot's phone. I'm sorry. This broke something in me. I should have seen it sooner. She didn't call back. Instead, she typed a letter, not an email, on her old typewriter, the same one she used to use for captioning depositions. The keystrokes were heavy, final. Rachel, you can have your silence now. I'm done. Margot, she folded it neatly, placed it in a linen envelope, and left it unsealed. Naomi slipped in a pressed pansy before sealing it and placing it in the outgoing mail tray. Later that week, a letter arrived, hand-addressed in teenage script. Naomi passed it to Margot with raised brows. Inside was a note card with watercolor edges. In faint, uneven cursive, I'm sorry. I believe you now. Sophie. The paper smelled faintly of mint and library glue, something nostalgic and broken. Margot stared at it a long time before placing it in the cedar box beside her desk. On Friday morning, just as Naomi was baking cornbread for breakfast, Margot's phone rang. She answered with her hearing aid in volume steady. Margot Ellis, said the voice from the county registrar's office. Yes, This is to confirm the Whitmore Lane property deed has been formally recorded in the name of Naomi Ellis, in trust, effective immediately. The designation is now legally irreversible, under current elder asset protections. Margot didn't respond right away. She looked across the kitchen to Naomi, who was stirring batter and humming under her breath. "Thank you," Margot said, eyes fixed on her granddaughter. "You've made quite the legacy," the clerk added. "Congratulations." She hung up, set the phone down slowly, and walked outside. The roses were blooming again, taller this time, rooted. The paint roller made a soft swishing sound, like breath across linen. Sage green spread slowly over the walls, washing away decades of beige and silence. "This is the color of calm," Naomi said, standing on tiptoes to reach the upper trim. Her hair was tied back with a scarf Margot had kept in her nightstand drawer since 1984. Or rebellion. Depends on the lighting. Margot smiled, seated on a small stool by the window, her hands resting on a drop cloth. "It'll be both," she said. "We've earned both." The guest room had been cold for years. Visitors came and went, but no one stayed. No roots were laid there. No memories stuck, until now. Naomi had declared it Margot's space, not for sleeping but for writing, remembering, reclaiming. They replaced the mattress with a writing desk. A soft leather chair now faced the window that overlooked the garden, and above the door, Naomi had nailed a wooden plaque she'd painted herself. "Listen louder." Margot ran her fingers over the carved letters, her hearing aid humming gently in her ear. She'd stopped turning it all the way up. Some things were better felt in silence. She opened the thin manila folder that held a photo of her younger self, mid-30s, hair pinned tight, arms folded across a dark blue interpreter uniform. The backdrop was a courtroom in Raleigh. She remembered that day. She'd helped a young deaf woman file a restraining order against a husband no one believed existed. "I used to be the one who helped people speak when no one would listen," she murmured, pinning the photo to a corkboard above her desk. Now she wrote. The title at the top of the page read "The Silence They Created." Naomi peeked over her shoulder. "That's heavy. It's honest." Naomi nodded. "Then it's perfect." Margot's handwriting was slow but sure. She filled one page that afternoon, then 3 the next. Sometimes she paused just to stare out at the hills. Sometimes she typed a single word and erased it. Other days her memories came in a flood. One afternoon, Della arrived with a slim black binder under her arm and a cinnamon scone in the other. "Proof of victory," she said, placing both on the desk. The binder was labeled "Case Closed." Inside, every notarized form, transcript, timestamp and affidavit that had stitched Margot's protection into law. "You're officially bulletproof," Della said, biting into her scone. "I'll believe that when Rachel stops trying to orbit. She won't. But she's out of fuel. Legal, emotionally, financially. You took her engine apart with tweezers." Margot laughed, deep and low. The sound settled into the walls like incense. Naomi leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Think we're safe now?" Margot didn't answer right away. She looked around the room, at the sage walls, the plaque above the door, the photo of herself when her spine was straighter and her hair didn't carry silver threads. "No," she said finally, "but we're ready next time." That night, after dinner, Naomi curled up on the couch with her laptop. Margot read aloud from her journal, a passage about the birthday dinner, and the silence they'd forced on her. Naomi's phone buzzed mid-sentence. She read the notification, blinked, then sat up straighter. "Grandma," she said, handing the phone to Margot. On the screen an email. Subject, "Book interest, from Oak Hill Publishing. Dear Miss Ellis, I came across your recent legal story through a professional referral and was deeply moved by the strength, clarity, and generational importance of your voice. If you're open to it, I'd love to talk about shaping your story into a published memoir. Warmly, Anna Keene." Senior editor. Margot reread it twice. Then she whispered, mostly to herself, "And they thought they'd silenced me. The kettle began its low whistle just as the first pink line of dawn spread across the eastern ridge. Margot stood in her kitchen robe, hands wrapped around the edges of the counter, watching steam curl up from her mug like a secret she'd never tell. Outside the window, the garden glistened with dew, rows of rosemary and lilac waking slowly in the August haze. The porch swing creaked once, empty, swaying gently, like it remembered company. Her house had grown still again, but not silent, not the kind of silence they tried to give her. This was chosen, full of breath. Behind her, Naomi sat on the floor with her sketch pad open, bare feet tucked under her, a soft indie playlist humming through the Bluetooth speaker at a respectful volume. The notes were clear, warm, no distortion, no overcorrection. Margot didn't wear her hearing aid this morning. It rested in its charger like a surrendered weapon. She didn't need it to feel present. She didn't need it to feel power. She sipped her coffee slowly, the bitterness perfect. Make the good strong, she'd told Naomi the first morning they lived alone. So even when the rest turns, you still taste control. That morning it tasted like victory. A tap at the glass door startled neither of them. The mail carrier, always early, left a single white envelope propped against the doormat. Naomi jogged barefoot to retrieve it, squinting at the return label. "Grant Committee," she said, handing it over. Margot's fingers didn't tremble as she opened it. Inside was a single typed page with a letterhead from the Asheville Center for Accessible Justice. "Congratulations, your advocacy initiative, Silent Strength, has been approved for community funding and publication support. We are honored to help amplify the voice you refuse to surrender." Margot exhaled, long and slow, like a woman setting down a burden she'd been told she wasn't strong enough to carry. Naomi beamed as she read over her shoulder. "You're going to teach people how to survive this," Naomi whispered, "how to come out the other side whole." Margot walked over to her desk, flipping open the hardbound journal she'd nearly filled these last few weeks. Each page a thread of her woven resistance, the strategies, the loopholes, the moments that mattered. On the final page she wrote one last line. "My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy." She closed the book with both hands, as if sealing something sacred. Later that morning, Naomi knelt in the flower bed, sketching Margot from the side as she trimmed the hydrangeas. The old woman's shoulders were back, not stiff but settled, the way oak trees grow into the shape they were always meant to be. "You ever think they'll understand?" Naomi asked without looking up. Margot wiped dirt on her jeans and thought carefully. "Understanding requires listening," she said. "And they never practiced either." Naomi sat back on her heels. "You scared me once. That night when you didn't say anything back." Margot's smile didn't waver. "That's when I knew I was finally being heard." A soft wind passed through the porch screens, carrying the scent of basil and late summer sun. Somewhere far off, a car door slammed, but no one turned toward it. Not anymore. Inside, a stack of boxes sat in the hallway, filled with copies of her legal report, her memoir drafts, grant paperwork, Naomi's sketches, all labeled with a sharp black marker. Persistence, documented. Margot stepped onto the porch one last time that day, mug refilled, spine steady. The garden stretched out before her like an answer. Her name was on the deed, on the mailbox, on the trust. And in the stories Naomi would one day tell in her own voice. Rachel had taken the aid. Doug had handed her the documents. The court had seen the line they tried to cross, but they had never, not once, truly seen her. Naomi joined her on the swing. "They'll never understand you, will they?" Margot didn't look away from the mountain. "No," she said, voice sure and calm. "But they'll never touch me again."